Here's my proposal for gun regulation. Are you ready? I think the federal government should draw up a number of proposals that are complete. So a number of proposals on gun control that are complete proposals that the federal government then does nothing with. So I'm not asking the federal government to pass any laws. None. Zero laws. I'm asking the federal government to create some standardized, suggested laws for the states. And what makes it more powerful is that they would be complete laws. In other words, smart people would look into it and they'd say, all right, background checks. What's the smartest thing we can do with background checks? Maybe it includes doing something with the gun shows and having background checks there. Apparently, 90% of the country is in favor of that. But what if there's a state that's not? What if there's a state that doesn't want to do that? Why not give them the option? Why not have the federal government come up with a set of standardized state-friendly regulations that can be approved by any state or not approved by any state, and then just see how it goes? Let's talk about gun control. I've heard it said that the United States is really two countries. Depending on how you want to slice things, it could be lots of different countries in one. But in the gun control sense, there are big swaths of the country where they're pro-gun. There are parts of the country where they're more anti-gun. And how do you have one set of policies that apply to everybody when some are pro and they probably would be better off with guns and some are anti and maybe they'd be worse off with guns? So what do? Here's what I would do. Here's my proposal for gun regulation. Are you ready? I think the federal government should draw up a number of proposals that are complete. So a number of proposals on gun control that are complete proposals that the federal government then does nothing with. So I'm not asking the federal government to pass any laws. None. Zero laws. I'm asking the federal government to create some standardized, suggested laws for the states. And what makes it more powerful is that they would be complete laws. In other words, smart people would look into it and they'd say, all right, background checks. What's the smartest thing we can do with background checks? Maybe it includes doing something with the gun shows and having background checks there. Apparently, 90% of the country is in favor of that. But what if there's a state that's not? What if there's a state that doesn't want to do that? Why not give them the option? Why not have the federal government come up with a set of standardized state-friendly regulations that can be approved by any state or not approved by any state, and then just see how it goes? Now, I know what you're saying. The motivated people will drive across the state border to do whatever they're going to do. Yeah, but I think we would be able to pick up on that over time. In other words, we could interview criminals and mass killers and say, where'd you get your gun? We can usually figure it out. And we would find out if the only thing that happened is that nothing happened. People just went across the state line and nothing changed. That might happen. But generally speaking, whenever you introduce friction, people do change behavior. So I would expect that anything with friction would change behavior. So I would take the federal government out of the business of passing laws because they can't. Apparently, our federal government is not capable of passing laws about guns because of the politics, the NRA, etc. But they're certainly capable of putting together a set of standardized, suggested policies. Different states would adopt different ones of them and maybe tweak them a little bit, but you'd have a standardized set of smart things to do. And then you would be using your states as the laboratories of democracy as they were intended. The states far more capable of passing laws, would say, all right, we passed this one. This other state on the other side of the country did not pass it. Let's see how we do. Let's see if this new law makes us have fewer problems over the next 5 years compared to the other states. Now, if you do this, you have a system which everybody can love. Yeah, it's a system instead of a goal. And of course, there's no end to how much you could keep improving these little suggested changes. But I think states should get every opportunity to vote on a set of restrictions for themselves. And other states may say, we don't need it. Now, here's another thing that I was looking at on gun control. I didn't realize that that almost half of people or half of gun owners, I'm not sure, but there's a lot of support for a mandatory buyback of all assault weapons. When I say a lot of support, something like half the country supports that. Now, that's not nearly enough to make something happen. And probably the majority of you on this Periscope are saying, good, we don't want it to happen. We don't want some irrational buyback of AR-15s just because they look scary. So I get that. But how about this? Would you be in favor of, instead of a buyback, just changing the laws about who can own one? So I made some off the top of my head suggestions the other day. Suppose you said you can get an AR-15 if you have experience in the military or law enforcement. So you already have some credentials as a person who can handle a gun. And maybe secondly, if you already have been a gun owner for a while, one more gun probably isn't going to make a difference because you already own a bunch of guns. So maybe that's an exception. And maybe over 50. Yeah, veterans, etc. Maybe if you're over 50, maybe no restrictions because people over 50 don't tend to be big criminals. But, and suppose you're a woman. If you're a woman who wants to buy a weapon, I would say that should be okay too because there's no history of women being big shooters. Somebody says, oh my God, Scott is totally drinking the Kool-Aid. If you're saying that, you're not understanding what I'm saying. You should understand me to say that there are a variety of things people have suggested, and there are a variety of states that contest it. What I'm not suggesting is that everybody have their guns taken away. I'm very pro-Second Amendment, and I do look at Hong Kong like the rest of you. The Hong Kong situation just couldn't happen here. Imagine all those people who are marching in Hong Kong. Now you move that to the United States, and it's a life or death question for your republic. How many of those people would be armed to the teeth? Quite a few. You would have a lot of weapons come out in this country if the republic were actually at risk. A lot of weapons would come out, and it would make a difference. It would absolutely make a difference. So I'm pro-gun for all the same reasons most of you are, but I don't believe the slippery slope. I don't believe that we just start going in some direction and we can't change anything. Almost everything that we do in this country that's dangerous has regulations. It doesn't kill us. I put my seatbelt on every day. It doesn't make me unhappy. I have safety features in my car. It doesn't make me unhappy. Children can't buy cigarettes. That doesn't make me unhappy. We already have lots of regulations, and they mostly work. Mostly. So I don't mind them on guns. If you're a absolutist on guns because of the Constitution, I would say that's not really a supportable position, to be an absolutist on guns. It's not supportable either way. It's not supportable to be absolutely in favor of no restrictions, and it is not supportable to have them all taken away. All right. So that's where I stand. I think we should do a better job of slicing and dicing the public. And let's just be honest. It's men under the age of 50 who are doing all the gun violence. So why should they be treated the same as everybody else? Let's discriminate. Let's discriminate against young men who don't have training, they're not part of the NRA, don't already own guns, haven't been in the military, have not been in law enforcement. So I would make lots of exceptions. Lots of exceptions. But if you're just a loner who wants to buy your first gun and it's an AR-15 and you're not a member of the NRA, you've not been in the military, you've never been in law enforcement, that's not good enough for me. Now, we already have, 10 or 20 million AR-type weapons in the country. I'm pretty sure we have enough already that if the government wanted to make a play, we could pass them out. We'd have all the guns we needed. So I'm not too worried about that. All right. In fact, if everybody's, if the women all bought the guns, they wouldn't necessarily have to do the fighting, because if we had a revolution in this country, the guys would end up with the guns, whether the women were the ones that licensed them in the first place or not.